Hey everybody, welcome back to Game Bites, our show about creating video game assets. I'm your host, Amni Jakala, and today on our show we have Andrew Coleman.
Hey guys.
And then coming back from the last episode, our lead artist on the project, Sammy Briggs.
Hello.
And joining us on the project for the first time, someone who's going to be helping us with some programming tasks, hint hint, Madison Lee.
Hey everyone.
This is our second episode of Snowboard Kids. The last episode we recorded was over a year ago, actually. Back in November of last year, so it's been a long time coming, but rest assured there's a lot of stuff we're working on. Some stuff that you're not even going to see in this video, but we'll get to that in another video, hopefully not a year from now. But for this video, we're going to be taking a look at Slash Kamei. Slash is essentially the main character of the Snowboard Kids series. He is probably the most iconic, a character that even if you didn't play the game, maybe you saw the character in a magazine or something like that back in the N64 days. So it made sense for us to tackle this character as soon as possible. So it's funny that we didn't actually start with Slash and instead started with Mr. Dog, but we got to Slash, so it's exciting to see this all coming together. But yeah, I guess it is good that we got some of the kinks ironed out with the pipeline and figuring out the style so that we knew exactly what we wanted to do with the human characters, since we got an animal character out of the way first. So let's talk about Slash's personality a little bit. So he's there's a lot of similarities between Slash and Sonic, as we've come to realize. He's very confident, sort of cocky, likes to play pranks on people, a little bit reckless and careless. Slash also has a very heated rivalry with Linda, another character in the game.
He's also the most balanced character in terms of stats in both Snowboard Kids 1 and 2, basically making him like the base character in both games.
Like kind of Mario in Smash kind of dynamic.
Or Mario in Mario Kart even. Not even you don't even go to Smash.
He's just the most basic character, which is sometimes unfortunate because like in a lot of these like competitive games, the main character is often the most balanced, but as a result kind of feels the most bland, even though they're supposed to be like the protagonist. So maybe, I don't know if that's necessarily true of Slash. I almost did Sonic. Look at that. So in the original two games, he's got a very big nose and pretty much stayed the same as far as his physicality goes, but the fashion definitely changed a little bit. Hair is pretty much the same, but he's definitely wearing decidedly less snowboard-worthy attire in the second game.
My only complaint is that he doesn't really look like a snowboarder if you took him out of the game.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, I guess, but also in 2, they go to a lot more crazier, less snowy locations.
Yeah, true.
He's got a hairstyle that kind of plays to the camera, or like the viewer's perspective, so that was going to be a challenge we knew right off the bat. And he's sort of got this like very casual dress vibe going on. He's got face paint. Like Sonic the Hedgehog, he also had a green eye change. What's with all the green eye changes? Anyway. So other design elements to the character that are pretty common across the board is that he's got very, very short limbs and very large hands and feet, which, can often pose a challenge when it comes to 3D animation. So that was something that definitely factored into the design that we ended up with. One of the big changes between the first and the second game across the board is that characters aren't all wearing goggles anymore, which is a little bit of a bummer because I like the goggles. So we can talk about sort of how all of this influenced the design that we came up with. So let's talk a little bit about the process of redesigning the character for our iteration of the game, if you want to call it a game. It's a fan project, but I'm going to focus on you, Sammy, because you're the one who's leading the art direction, and of course this is pretty much all of your character design. So when it comes to trying to come up with the changes that you wanted to make between 1 and 2, and then the iteration for 3, what's your general approach to like what the differences are?
So I think for me, obviously I want to keep the actual art style intact, but with the initial sketching, it was really hard to implement the actual art style from the original games into my own because, usually when I draw fan art, I'm just drawing without really thinking. But with this, I really had to study and do constant sketches to really get that art style in. So because of the 1 or 2 year time skip from the second game. I figured they could do with being a little taller, extending their limbs slightly, but mostly I wanted to focus on the facial structure as well, slimlining everything, because in the original they have like these really puffy cheeks and they're kind of stubby, and I don't think they even have necks, so to make things
yeah, in the original, yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of the actual 3D model as well, I wanted to make it easier to translate over into 3D by adding a neck.
And I think in all of the art, they only ever imply a neck. I don't think they've ever shown
yeah,
one.
Basically.
exactly.
Very similar to Sonic again. There's going to be a lot of comparisons to Sonic because, boy, there's a lot of similarities. Something that I thought was interesting, there was that the Animaniacs reboot that they did recently, and one of the like philosophies that they had going into character design for that was that they wanted to make the characters feel like how you remember them rather than literally how they were back then.
Yeah.
So there's subtle changes just to make it feel like, you know, with the new kinds of animation styles that we have in modern day, that kind of seeps into your recollection of how characters feel from back in the day. So for it to not feel like ancient as soon as you make it, you have to do something with it, right?
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to function as well, the slightly longer limbs is going to help to convey more human gestures without having to be awkward, because that's a big challenge that I see a lot with Sonic animation. You know, he's got these giant feet that are basically as long as his legs are tall. So like, you know, galumphing around with those big shoes, it's got to be challenging from an animation perspective, because you really can't relate to that as a human being. Like, how do you walk that way? So, you know, that's probably why they did it in Sonic Boom, like, because they knew they were going to create a TV series where they're going to be doing a lot of animation. It's probably easier for them to be closer to proper human proportion. This is something that we talked about in other videos on the channel. Taking a character with a hairstyle like this very anime spiky hairstyle, and bringing that into 3D in a way that satisfies the look of the 2D illustrations is always a challenge. And it's something that you even see with, you know, Toei Sonic has to do the very different looking silhouette when viewing from the front. They kind of had a similar approach to Goku and other characters like that, like Yugi from Yu-Gi-Oh!, where you have to try to play to the camera. And you can do that easily in 2D, but it's harder in 3D. You can still do it. And even, you know, movies, the animated movies will do that a lot of times, cheat to the camera. But when it comes to a game camera where it's a lot more in the user's control, the player's control, it's harder to figure out logistically how to do that. But it was definitely a big talking point when we were coming up with the hairstyle, because in the original games, the 3D version of the character just looks like a plane, like a cone, rather than it really just doesn't resemble the 2D illustration very well. So we wanted to try to capture that a bit more faithfully. Yeah,
that was really hard to figure out. I did some like hair sketches to kind of get an idea of how it's going to work in 3D, and it kept looking like Sonic. It was driving me nuts.
Yeah,
even the original artwork, like sometimes he'll look exactly like Sonic, and then sometimes it's got a different shape.
I remember when I was a kid playing Snowboard Kids 1, and I was always confused whether Slash was wearing like a crown or something. But now I understand why it looked like that. Because they didn't have enough polygons to fill in the top of his head. And
yeah,
it looks okay if you're looking at him from the side, but when you're actually playing as him in game, you're always looking at him from like the back top of his head.
Right.
So it comes off as kind of an odd shape.
What we ended up doing was just not trying to cheat to the camera, just because logistically it'd be kind of difficult to do. But I tried to position these spikes in a way that it's at least a pleasing silhouette from different angles. And it ended up looking a lot like Sonic the Hedgehog again. But I did try to, you know, I went out of my way to try to break it up in certain ways so that it doesn't feel too much like Sonic. Obviously, he has more quills, so to speak. They're not quills, it's hair. But I think you can kind of see, even comparing it to the original 3D models from the N64, you can kind of see that sort of like crown shape arrangement of the ones on the out perimeter. And then there's like one spike breaking it up in the middle that kind of fills out the rest. But I think it works. It's definitely a challenge, and with different hats or headgear, it's probably going to change a little bit here and there, but I think I'm pretty happy with how it came out. One design element that was in an earlier concept that you had done, Sammy, was this little hair flick, as we like to call it. It's this small little tuft of hair that sticks out from the front, just to sort of break up the sort of uniformity from like the slope from his forehead up to his like the tips of his hair at the top. Is that something that you had done in some of your earlier works with Snowboard Kids art, or is that something that you introduced just for the project?
I don't think I've ever drawn the flick. I don't know what came over me. I don't know why I drew it. I was like, oh, that looks cute, and then I realized, that might be too similar to Damien if we ever cover Damien. But I don't know, I just thought it just made the silhouette look a bit more interesting. And I think it suits the character anyway.
If we do Damien, like his hair tuft in the original goes down, so maybe we could just let that be the difference.
Yeah.
You went through a lot of precedent to work from with the first two games, so what was your general thought process when it comes to coming up with the clothing?
Yeah, it was hard. I think first off, I just looked at the first two games. There's quite some similarities in the silhouette of both, I'd say. They're both wearing like bigger shirts.
Very 90s of them.
Yeah. So I figured I'd want to do that. And also, I was trying to think of what fashion would Slash actually wear, instead of just throwing him into something super cool, which would have been awesome. But I don't know, I think I played it a little bit too safe, but overall I just figured, okay, maybe Slash just prefers casual and loose clothing. So that was my initial idea for the basis of how I'm gonna come up with all the outfits.
You had mentioned also that in Snowboard Kids 2 they kind of started to move away from actual proper winter wear, because his design in Snowboard Kids 2, it just kind of feels like a general sports attire. Like, it doesn't really feel like, if you took it out of context, you wouldn't look at him and say, oh, that's a snowboarder. That's almost like a tennis player or something like that.
He just looks like a dude.
Yeah.
He's just some dude. Yeah, that was my only complaint with the outfits in 2. Not so much all of them, but mostly Slash. But I think it works for the game because of how bombastic all the levels are, so it's fine.
It looks like you also incorporated his hood from Snowboard Kids 1 into his outfit that you designed.
Oh, yeah. I have no idea what that is. It looks like a bib. Like a...
It does look like a bib.
But no, I think when I was researching snowboard outfits in general, there was like these neck warmers, and I figured that might be a nice way to kind of break up the shirt and from his head or whatever.
So I gotta ask, when it came to the headband part of the, not hat because it's not a hat, but I remember you guys went back and forth between red and blue.
Oh my god, yes.
What was the apprehension with blue? Was it that it was too Sonic-y?
It was just, I was worried it was being a bit too similar to Sonic, because blue's my favorite color, so I was worried I was being way too biased. But god, yeah, I went back on that so many times. But I think the reason why I stuck to red was because red felt more iconic to the character, and in general I was debating trying different color palettes with Slash. So I was worried that I wasn't being too creative or I was being too safe with the design, but I think I can't see Slash going too crazy with his outfit, and I wanted to keep it simple anyway. So with the actual shirt designs, I concepted some graphics that were like callbacks to the original game, and then I settled on a tree symbol, which is a callback to the sapling graphic from the first game. I thought that'd be really cool, so... Yeah,
I think that's a nice little development. You start with a sapling in the first games, and then after, I guess, 2 years, it's a full-grown tree.
Yeah. But in the end, I decided to keep it the same. So I wanted to keep the red headband so it was more iconic to the character. Everyone was familiar with it, but I do really like the blue headband, so... Oh well.
Yeah, I mean, if we have a chance to do alt costumes or something, then that's definitely something we can play with.
Yeah.
But I do agree that like the red feels it's like the common thread between the designs of 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Because the headband on 2 at least has some red on it. So it also has blue on it though. So, we could make the argument that it's like a gradual change from red to blue. But we could also go with yellow. No, let's not do that. Another note that I think is important, not important, but nice to see, is that the red contrasts well with the goggles, which kind of provide the red, like the blue to green, almost yellow, which is almost a callback to Snowboard Kids 2. So I think it works pretty well. Obviously, we could, if we went with a blue headband, we could change the goggles to be like red or something, but I think it's a good look. Another thing that we're kind of pulling from, or rather not necessarily pulling, but we're heavily influenced by, is the fashion in Splatoon. It's something that we had to kind of go back and forth with when it comes to how much realism to inject into the design, because Splatoon's fashion is pretty true to reality. Like, there's a lot of detail. If you look at the textures, they're really pulling a lot of normal detail out of those to try to make the laces feel real and get a lot of wrinkles and whatnot, which to an extent, like the juxtaposition there works pretty well. But I'm sure when it comes to the style that we're trying to establish, that's definitely something that we wanted to figure out, is what balance of realism and simplicity do we want to get. And I think we probably landed on something that's a little closer to simplicity than Splatoon, but it's definitely still an influence there, because like I said, we're all Splatoon fans, or at least 3 of us. I don't know, Maddie, do you play Splatoon?
Yes, sir.
Sweet, all of us.
Yeah.
Cool.
Before we move on from this, how did you decide on the gloves? Because you have a back piece to the gloves, a color break in the middle of them, and they're fingerless. Because I noticed that in Snowboard Kids 1, he also has like a color break on the fingers. I was wondering if it was like reminiscent of that, or if it was just
kind of. I think I just thought it'd be cool if for this game he had just fingerless gloves, because I feel like there's a lot of white anyway. So if I put white, or I don't know, I just didn't think it'd read as well. It might be too busy color wise, just having like black, white and red everywhere. I don't know, I just thought just fingerless gloves might be cool.
It's always fun to have a design element on a character that is not practical at all, but looks good. So fingerless gloves in the snow, let's do it. So a lot of us here are Splatoon fans, so there's a lot of influence coming from that direction, where there's the possibility of doing multiple outfits. So we might be able to revisit some of these shapes and ideas down the line if we wanted to do alternative outfits. But for now, I think the rounded bottom edge of the goggles plays a little bit more with well, at least it feels a little bit more natural sitting on top of the bridge of the nose once you pull the goggles down, which is something that the characters are going to do, is get their goggles down before they start a race.
That was pretty much the reason why I just kept it simple in the end, because I figured, this might look a bit weird on the 3D model. So
but yeah, that's the design we landed on. As you can see, the hair flick did make it to the final version, so you'll be seeing more of that. We were going back and forth on, like, logistically, how do we want to handle facial expression for the character, because if you look at a game like Splatoon, for instance, they do a lot of mesh swaps for all of their face shapes. So even if you're doing the mouth movements, you can definitely see them popping between all of these different, they didn't even like blend them together, it's just a bunch of different topologies for the mouth that they just swap out.
Also Smash Brothers as well, but it's harder to tell since the characters are usually a lot smaller,
and they don't tend to like talk so much. But we were trying to play with, like, how do we translate the way Sammy draws facial expressions into 3D, because generally they're pretty focused on how it looks in the 3/4 view. It's actually pretty similar to the dilemma of Sonic's mouth, where you put the mouth in the center. Some of the earlier 3D games just put his mouth in the center because logistically it's just simpler. But in the end, we ended up doing topology for the face. So I did a few sculpts of different expressions, trying to make it feel as much like Sammy's art as possible. And maybe we've talked about this in Mr. Dogs, but so the way that you've sort of got the highlight of the eye leaving the boundaries of the eye, is that something that you like to do with all of your character art, not just with Snowboard Kids, but in general? Is that something that you...
It accidentally came over into this project, I'm sorry. But
No, it's not a problem. It's a nice style.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm really impressed with how you guys animated it as well, with the blinking. It's so good. I just hope people aren't too bothered by it. So, like me putting the eyes shine that way.
I feel like it helps the character feel less like a standard 3D model, I guess, because he still has some roots keeping him true to your illustrations still.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that, like, if you were to compare this character to characters in similar styles from other games, it would be something that is like an anchor for the style. Like, oh, it's got that eye thing, that highlight thing that they do, that's different from everything else. So I think it helps to make it feel a little bit more unique compared to everything that you might compare it to.
I'm glad. I was worried about that.
There's one thing I have to talk about when it comes to textures, Andrew. We have to address this. When it comes to baking, it's very difficult to bake fingers, right? Because the rays intersect with, like, there's very little space between fingers in a typical T-pose. So what was the solution, Andrew? You have to enlighten us.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we had to break his fingers. But on the plus side, it led to some really great normal bakes for his fingers, because it's usually not too much of a problem for normal human-sized fingers, but for Slash's big chunky fingers, it became
because
quite
are his fingers already like intersecting in neutral pose, in rest pose? Man, but it turned out great. Yeah, after you broke his fingers. So that pretty much wraps it up, guys. I hope you've all enjoyed what we've been able to show you in this one, and hopefully we'll have another update for you guys in the coming months. But until then, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, do all the things that every YouTuber tells you to do. Or don't, I'm not the boss of you. If you really like what we're doing here on this channel, then be sure to check out the Patreon if you want to just support us monetarily in some way. It's really just a tip jar, so there's no pressure to support us in that way. But if you really like what we're doing, feel free to check it out. And we'll see you guys next time.